The wedding hall doors slam open. Amara stands frozen at the altar in a borrowed white dress, staring at the scarred man waiting to become her husband. Her hands tremble against the wilted bouquet. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo's voice cuts through the silence like a blade. You'll marry the criminal, or your brother rots in prison. No one marries for love when debt collectors are knocking. The orphan girl who spent years sewing wedding gowns for others never dreamed her own ceremony would feel like a noose tightening. Have you ever been forced into a choice that felt like betrayal of yourself? What would you sacrifice for family? This is one of those real-life stories that sounds like African folklore, yet it happened in Lagos. Among touching stories from Africa, this tale reminds us how life stories twist in ways we never expect. 72 hours earlier, the police station smelled of sweat and old paperwork. Amara pressed her palms against the glass partition, separating her from her younger brother, Emeka. His eyes were red-rimmed, his white shirt wrinkled from 2 nights in a holding cell. I didn't take it, Emeka said, his voice cracking. I swear on Mama's grave. I was just delivering fabric to their estate when the generator went missing. The charges were simple and devastating. Theft of Chief Okonkwo's imported Meccano generator, valued at $800,000. Security footage from the estate's cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned that afternoon. No witnesses, no evidence except the word of the chief's gateman. The bail was set at N2.5 million. Amara's seamstress income averaged N15,000 per week. Even if she stopped eating, stopped paying rent, the math was impossible. Under Nigerian criminal procedure, bail required a guarantor with collateral worth 3 times the bail amount. She owned nothing but her sewing machine and a rented room in Surulere. Emeka would remain in custody until trial. The trial date was set for 3 weeks away. She walked home in the rain, fabric samples in her bag bleeding dye onto her hands. Purple and silver threads tangled together, ruined. The knock came on a Sunday evening, interrupting Amara's attempt to finish a bridesmaid dress for a client. She opened the door to find Chief Mrs. Okonkwo standing on the narrow staircase, flanked by her driver, holding an umbrella. Mrs. Okonkwo didn't wait for an invitation. She swept into the one-room apartment, her gold jewelry clinking, her perfume too heavy for the small space. A brooch shaped like a clenched fist gleamed at her collar. You sew well, Mrs. Okonkwo said, examining a half-finished wedding gown draped over a mannequin. Good eye for detail. Pity you waste it on cheap brides. Amara stayed by the door. What do you want? Your brother is in a difficult position. Mrs. Okonkwo sat on Amara's only chair without being offered. The prosecutor is my cousin. The magistrate is my husband's golf partner. Emeka will be convicted unless someone intervenes. He's innocent. Innocence is a luxury, my dear. Guilt is decided by those who hold the pen. Mrs. Okonkwo's smile didn't reach her eyes. However, I can hold that pen for you. If you're willing to negotiate. Amara's stomach tightened. I have no money. I don't want money. Mrs. Okonkwo leaned forward. I want a solution to a different problem. I have a groom who is difficult to place. His background makes respectable families refuse, but he needs a wife for appearances. You need your brother released. This is business, or who is he? His name is Chidi. He served 5 years in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison for corporate fraud. Released 18 months ago. He's quiet, not violent, but his record makes him undesirable. Mrs. Okonkwo adjusted her brooch. You marry him, your brother walks free before trial. You refuse, Emeka gets 7 years minimum. Amara's hands shook. She thought of Obiora, the mathematics teacher who'd been courting her with shy smiles and borrowed poetry books. She thought of her mother's voice. A woman's dignity is her only inheritance. Guard it. Why would an ex-convict need a wife arranged by you? His reasons are his own. Your answer is what matters. Mrs. Okonkwo stood, brushing invisible dust from her wrapper. You have 48 hours. After that, I withdraw my influence. The prosecutor moves forward. Girls like you exist to solve problems for your betters. Learn your place. The door closed. The clenched fist brooch was the last thing Amara saw. The church courtyard was empty, except for the stone benches and the smell of incense drifting from evening mass. Amara arrived early, her church dress pressed, her hands clasped to stop their trembling. He appeared from the shadows near the jacaranda tree. Chidi was taller than she expected, lean and broad-shouldered. A jagged scar ran from his left jawline to his ear. pale against his dark skin. He wore a faded purple shirt and work trousers. A scratched silver watch caught the last light of sunset. "Amara?" His voice was soft, his Igbo accent educated, not rough. "Thank you for coming." She stayed near the gate, measuring the distance to the street. "Mrs. Okonkwo said you need a wife. She exaggerates my need. She wants control." Chidi sat on the bench, keeping space between them. "I won't pretend this arrangement is romantic, but I want you to know I won't harm you. You went to prison. I did. No defensiveness. No justification. Just fact for fraud, for exposing fraud." The distinction mattered to the judge's cousin who owned the company I reported. Chidi rubbed the scar absently. 5 years for telling the truth. I learned that justice has a price tag. Amara studied him. His hands were calloused but clean. His fingernails were trimmed. He smelled of sandalwood soap, not the stale air of desperation. Something about him didn't fit the narrative Mrs. Okonkwo had painted. "Why do you need a wife badly enough to accept this?" "Because Mrs. Okonkwo holds something over me too." Chidi reached into his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I can't explain everything yet, but if you decide to trust me, open this only when you're ready." He placed it on the bench between them and stood. "You don't owe me an answer now. But your brother's trial is in 10 days. Mrs. Okonkwo's guarantor signature is the only thing standing between him and conviction. I wish I could offer you better options. If I agree, what happens? We marry in 3 weeks. You live in your space, I live in mine. After 1 year, we dissolve it quietly. Your brother stays free. You get your life back." Amara picked up the envelope. It was lighter than she expected. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'm sorry for what happens next." Chidi walked toward the gate, then paused. "One more thing. The generator your brother supposedly stole? Mrs. Okonkwo's son Tunde sold it to pay gambling debts. I have proof. But proof means nothing without power." He disappeared into the evening traffic, leaving Amara alone with the envelope and the impossible choice. Inside the sanctuary, the choir began to sing. The hymn was about valleys and shadows and walking through them without fear. Amara didn't feel fearless. She felt like a woman being buried alive by other people's sins. But she opened the envelope anyway. Inside was a handwritten note in careful script. Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Below it, a phone number labeled "Emergency Only." Amara said yes the next morning, not because she believed in fairy tales or redemption arcs. She said yes because Emika's face through the prison glass haunted her sleep, and because every other door had already slammed shut. Mrs. Okonkwo's assistant delivered the marriage license paperwork within 2 hours. The wedding date was set for 3 weeks away, the minimum legal waiting period. The venue would be the Grandeur Hotel in Victoria Island. 200 guests, all from Mrs. Okonkwo's society circles. Amara was allowed to invite no one. "We'll handle your dress," the assistant said, handing her a business card for an upscale boutique. Amara tore the card in half after she left. If she was going to wear a noose, she would sew it herself. Her sewing machine hummed through the nights. White lace donated by Sister Nyosi from the church's charity bin. Ivory satin bought with the last of her savings. Every stitch was a prayer she didn't know how to voice. The dress took shape slowly. Simple lines, long sleeves, a high neckline. Nothing borrowed except the fabric. Nothing blue except the shadows under her eyes. Sister Ngozi visited on the 5th night, bringing Yolof rice in a covered bowl. The elderly woman sat on the floor beside Amara's workspace, her wrapper folded neatly across her knees. "You're making your own wedding dress," Sister Ngozi said softly. "Like your mother did." Amara's hand stilled on the fabric. "Mama married for love. Your mama married a man everyone said was too poor, too uneducated, too beneath her family's standing." Sister Ngozi smiled. "Love looks different depending on who's watching. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice. This isn't love. It's a transaction." "Then why are you putting so much care into the stitching?" Amara looked down at the hem, where she'd embroidered tiny purple flowers almost invisible against the white. She hadn't planned them. Her hands had moved on their own, creating beauty in a thing born from coercion. Because even caged birds still sing, she thought. Because they can take my choices, but not what I create with my own hands. Sister Ngozi touched the embroidery gently. "Child, sometimes God hides blessings in bruised packages. Watch that man's eyes, not his scars. After she left, Amara remembered her mother's voice from years ago. Judge a man by what he builds, not what he's lost. What he builds will tell you what he values. The groceries arrived on Tuesday. No note, just a delivery man with 3 bags. Rice, yams, tomatoes, palm oil, and at the bottom a small packet of chin-chin, the coconut kind she'd mentioned once in passing. He'd remembered. On Thursday, Emeka called from a different number. They moved me to a cleaner cell. The remand section. Did you do this? No. But she knew who had. On Saturday, a courier delivered a package. Inside was a simple silver bracelet and a handwritten note. For strength. You don't have to wear it. But it's yours if you need it. She put it on. The weight felt like an anchor, something solid when everything else was sinking. That evening, Amara sat in the cyber cafe near Ojuelegba Market, paying N200 for 30 minutes of internet. She typed his name, Chidi Fraud Conviction 2018. The articles loaded slowly on the sluggish connection. Whistleblower jailed after exposing N2 billion embezzlement scheme. The Guardian. March 2018, her breath stopped. Former executive sentenced. Despite evidence of corporate corruption. Vanguard. April 2018, she clicked through with shaking hands. Chidi had worked for a manufacturing conglomerate. He'd discovered the CFO was siphoning funds through ghost suppliers. He'd reported it internally, then to authorities. Within 6 months, he was arrested for falsifying documents he claimed were planted. The CFO's uncle was a federal judge. Chidi served 5 years. The embezzlement case disappeared. Amara's vision blurred. The screen timer blinked, 5 minutes remaining. She sat frozen, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, strangers typing around her in the cramped space. He told the truth, and they buried him for it. The cage she was in suddenly felt different. Not smaller, but shared. Mrs. Okonkwo summoned her 4 days before the wedding. Private room at the Wheatbaker Hotel in Ikoyi. Amara arrived in her church dress, the silver bracelet hidden under her sleeve. Mrs. Okonkwo sat with champagne, sweating on the side table. You've been well behaved. But there's one more requirement. Amara remained standing. The contract was marriage. I'm marrying him. Yes, but at the reception, you'll give a speech. You'll thank me publicly. You'll say you're grateful to marry a man others rejected because it let you save your criminal brother. Humble yourself before my guests. The words landed like stones. You want me to humiliate him? I want you to know your place. Both of you. Mrs. Okonkwo leaned forward. Or perhaps Emeka's situation becomes unstable. Accidents happen in remand. Fights, fools. Amara thought of the purple flowers on her dress. The embroidery her hands had made without permission from anyone. I'll marry him, she said quietly. I'll stand beside him, but I won't humiliate him. That wasn't our agreement. Mrs. Okonkwo's face hardened. So then your brother doesn't make it to see you married? Amara walked out. Outside, Lagos traffic roared past. Hawkers, gala sellers, life continuing. She pulled out Chidi's number with shaking hands. He answered immediately. Amara? She's threatening Emeka. She wants me to humiliate you publicly. I refused, and now I know. I've been waiting for this. His voice was steady. Your brother is being transferred tonight to protective custody. The lawyer I trust is filing an emergency motion. Mrs. Okonkwo's access is being blocked. How can you trust me 48 more hours? Can you do that? Amara closed her eyes. Who are you really? A pause. Someone who was powerless once. I'm not anymore. And neither are you if you let me help. Why do this for me? Because nobody helped me when I needed it. Because you embroidered purple flowers on a dress that scares you. Sister Ngozi told me. That takes more courage than most people have. 48 hours and then everything changes. Sister Ngozi came to help Amara dress. As she fastened the buttons, she paused. That watch he wears, Sister Ngozi said quietly. The silver one with the scratches. I've seen it before. Amara met her eyes in the mirror. Where? On the wrist of the man who donated 50 million naira to rebuild our church after the 2019 flood. He came once, handed the pastor a check, left before we could thank him. But I remember that watch. The kind diplomats wear. The kind you inherit, not buy. The room tilted. 50 million naira. The calm certainty in his voice. The way he moved through the world like someone who'd learned exactly how much power he had. "Who is he?" Amara whispered. Sister Ngozi smiled. "Someone who knows the price of being underestimated." The car arrived. Through tinted windows, Lagos blurred past. Markets and mansions. Beggars and businessmen. A city holding space for both ruin and resurrection. Amara touched the purple flowers on her dress and thought, "I chose to put beauty here. That choice is mine no matter what happens next." The car stopped at the Grandeur Hotel. 200 guests waited. Chidi stood at the altar, and Mrs. Okonkwo sat in the front row, gold fist brooch gleaming, certain she'd already won. The Grandeur Hotel ballroom smelled of imported lilies and old money. Crystal chandeliers refracted light across 200 faces, all of them strangers to Amara, except for the one that mattered least. Mrs. Okonkwo sat in the front row, her gold fist brooch catching every camera flash. Her guests filled the cream-colored chairs, society matrons in Geel head wraps that cost more than Amara's yearly rent, businessmen checking their phones between photo opportunities, daughters of politicians whispering behind manicured hands. Amara stood at the back entrance in her self-made dress, the purple flowers hidden in the folds of white lace. Her bouquet, white roses arranged by the hotel, felt too heavy in her sweating palms. The processional music began. Pachelbel's canon, played by a string quartet she hadn't chosen. She walked alone, no father to give her away, no mother to adjust her veil. Just the long aisle and the whispers that followed her like a shadow. The orphan girl, marrying the ex-convict. How desperate do you have to be? Amara kept her eyes forward. At the altar, Chidi stood in a tailored black suit that fit him like it was made for his body specifically. The scar on his jaw caught the light. The silver watch gleamed at his wrist. He met her eyes as she approached. Something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two people walking into the same storm from different directions. Pastor Adewale opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words washed over Amara like background noise. She was too aware of Mrs. Okonkwo's satisfied smile, the phones recording everything, the weight of the lie she was about to speak. "Do you, Amara? Take this man." She opened her mouth to say yes. The side door opened. A tall man in a magistrate's robe entered, flanked by 2 court clerks. Chief Magistrate Adeyemi, unscheduled and unannounced. Mrs. Okonkwo's face twitched. Just for a second, but Amara saw it. The crack in the porcelain mask. Pastor Adewale paused mid-sentence. "Your Honor, we weren't expecting—" "My apologies for the interruption." Magistrate Adeyemi's voice carried across the silent room. "Please continue. I'm simply here as a witness, a very interested witness." The whispers started like wind through dry grass. Mrs. Okonkwo half rose from her seat, then forced herself back down. Her smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes anymore. Chidi's hand found Amara's. His grip was steady, warm. Pastor Adewale cleared his throat and continued. "Do you, Amara Okafor, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Amara looked at Chidi, at the scar that told a story of survival, at the watch that Sister Ngozi said belonged to someone powerful, at the calm in his eyes that said, "Trust me just a little longer." "I do," she whispered. "And do you, Chidi, take this woman—" "Wait." Chidi's voice cut through the ceremony. "Before I answer, there's something I need to confess." The room froze. Mrs. Okonkwo's knuckles went white on her armrest. "Amara," Chidi turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "You deserve to know who I really am before you bind yourself to me. You deserve the truth." Amara's heart hammered. Around them, phones lifted. The recording lights glowed red. "My name is Chidi Okoli." He spoke clearly, projecting to the room. 5 years ago, I was imprisoned after exposing a N2 billion embezzlement scheme at my father's manufacturing company. The conviction was politically motivated. It was overturned by the Supreme Court 18 months ago, but by then the damage was done." He paused, his eyes never leaving Amara's face. "After my release, I rebuilt what my father started. Rebuilt it carefully, quietly. Today, Okoli Enterprises is valued at 45 billion naira. We employ 3,000 people across West Africa. I own the company. I am the CEO." The room erupted, gasps, shouts, camera flashes exploding like lightning, guests stumbling to their feet. Amara couldn't breathe. 45 billion naira. the groceries, the cell transfer, the lawyer, the watch that could buy a house. The man she thought was powerless owned an empire. Mrs. Okonkwo stood, her face drained of color. This is some kind of trick. What? It's not a trick. Chidi removed his watch and held it up. The overhead lights caught the engraving on the back. CO, Okoli Enterprises Esti, 1983. This was my father's. The company was his legacy. I spent 5 years in prison protecting it from people who wanted to strip it for parts. I spent the last 18 months rebuilding it into something that could protect others. He turned to Mrs. Okonkwo, his voice dropping to something colder. Including the orphan girl you tried to use as a pawn. Mrs. Okonkwo's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Chidi continued, addressing the room now. 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Okonkwo approached me with a proposition. She knew my background made me difficult to place in society. She offered to arrange a marriage that would rehabilitate my image in exchange for certain business concessions. Lies. Mrs. Okonkwo's voice cracked. You came to me! You needed... I have the text messages. Chidi nodded to someone in the back. A hotel staff member wheeled in a projection screen. A laptop powered on. Within seconds, text messages filled the screen, blown up for everyone to read. Mrs. Okonkwo. The girl is manageable, desperate, perfect leverage. Unknown number. And if she refuses? Mrs. Okonkwo, her brother stays in custody. She won't refuse. The room inhaled collectively. Magistrate Adeyemi stood. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Mrs. Okonkwo, I suggest you remain seated. More images flashed on the screen. Bank records. Security footage time-stamped and dated. Chidi's voice remained steady, surgical. 2 months ago, Mrs. Okonkwo's son Tunde sold his father's Mikano generator to settle a gambling debt of $650,000. When Chief Okonkwo noticed it missing, Tunde blamed Emeka Okafor, a delivery boy who'd been at the estate that afternoon. New footage played, Tunde loading a generator into a truck, accepting cash from a buyer. The timestamp read 3 hours before Emeka's arrest. The security footage Mrs. Okonkwo claimed was malfunctioning was actually deleted from the main server. But cloud backups are harder to erase. I had my IT team recover them. Amara's legs gave out. Chidi caught her, his arm supporting her weight. Mrs. Okonkwo then leveraged Emeka's false arrest to force Amara into this marriage. Her plan was simple. Control me through my wife, extract business contracts worth hundreds of millions, and maintain her grip on the social circles that give her power. He looked at Amara, his voice softening. What she didn't count on was that I'd been investigating her family's corruption for months, or that the girl she saw as disposable would be brave enough to refuse her demands. Mrs. Okonkwo lunged toward the exit. 2 hotel security guards blocked her path. Not hotel staff, Amara realized, but professionals hired by someone with resources. Magistrate Adeyemi approached the altar. Mrs. Okonkwo, I'm placing you under provisional detention pending formal charges. Coercion, false imprisonment, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. He pulled a document from his robe. This is an emergency court order obtained this morning, based on evidence provided by Mr. Okoli's legal team. Your son Tunde has confessed to the theft and implicated you in the conspiracy to frame Emeka Okafor. The guests erupted again. Phones recording every second. This would be on every blog, every news site, every WhatsApp status by sunset. Mrs. Okonkwo's gold brooch caught the light one last time as security escorted her toward the door. She turned back, her eyes finding Amara. You were nothing, she hissed. You'll always be nothing. Amara stepped forward. Her voice came out clear, calm, carrying across the ballroom. I am an orphan who sews for a living. You're right. I have no wealth, no family name, no social standing. She touched the purple flowers embroidered on her dress. But I have something you'll never understand. I know the difference between power and cruelty, and I know which one lasts. The security guards pulled Mrs. Okonkwo out. The doors closed. The room fell silent except for the sound of camera shutters clicking. Chidi turned to Amara. 200 people watching. The moment suspended between heartbeats. Amara, I release you from this arrangement. You owe me nothing. Your brother is free. Mrs. Okonkwo's power is broken. You can walk out of here and build whatever life you want. He paused. But if you choose to stay, it will be as my equal partner. Not my debtor, not my pawn, my equal. Amara looked at him, at the scar that wasn't a mark of shame but survival, at the watch that represented not wealth, but inheritance and responsibility, at the man who could have revealed his power from the beginning, but chose instead to let her keep her dignity. She thought of the purple flowers she'd embroidered without planning. Beauty created in the midst of coercion, choice claimed in the smallest spaces. Then let's finish what we started, she said. Not from obligation, from respect. She picked up the bouquet she'd dropped and held it between them. Pastor Adewale, stunned but adaptable, found his place in the ceremony book. Well then, shall we proceed with slightly more honest vows? The room erupted in applause, genuine this time, not performative. Guests who'd whispered cruel things 30 minutes ago now stood and cheered. Chidi smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter. I do, he said. Then by the power vested in me, Pastor Adewale pronounced, I now declare you husband and wife. The ballroom transformed in the hour after Mrs. Okonkwo's arrest. What began as a staged performance became something else entirely, a celebration with witnesses to history. Chidi's hand stayed at the small of Amara's back as they navigated the crowd. Guests who'd whispered cruelty an hour ago now competed to congratulate them. Society matrons who'd sneered at the orphan bride now praised her composure. Politicians who'd ignored Chidi's entrance now requested business cards. Amara watched the performance with clinical precision. They're like birds changing direction mid-flight. No loyalty except to power. You're learning fast, Chidi murmured. I'm learning exactly who not to become. A ripple moved through the crowd. The reception hall doors opened, and Amika entered, flanked by Chidi's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in a burgundy suit. Amara's champagne glass hit the table. She crossed the distance in seconds, her wedding dress trailing behind her, her arms wrapped around her brother, and for the first time in 3 weeks she felt his heartbeat against her shoulder. You're out, she whispered. You're actually free. Charges dropped an hour ago. Amika pulled back, studying her face, the dress, the impossible transformation. They said you married a CEO, that you exposed Mrs. Okonkwo. He exposed her. Amara glanced at Chidi. I just refused to be her weapon. Amika's voice cracked. I'm sorry you had to. You were never the trap. Her cruelty was. Amara straightened his borrowed collar. Now eat real food. As much as you want. Chidi's legal team set up a corner table displaying evidence. Barrister Nkem Okoli, Chidi's cousin, narrated with surgical precision while guests crowded around, phones recording. Mrs. Okonkwo's pattern spans 15 years, 12 arranged marriages in her circle, 8 involved blackmail or coercion, 4 resulted in business acquisitions benefiting her family's portfolio. A woman in an orange jeel spoke up, her voice shaking. My niece married into the Obi family 3 years ago. Mrs. Okonkwo arranged it. The girl tried to refuse, and suddenly her father's business license was under investigation. She married to save him. My nephew's company, another guest added, was bought out by Chief Okonkwo's firm right after his arranged marriage. Hostile takeover disguised as family merger. That's speculation. A man in an expensive agbada pushed forward, Chief Okonkwo's business partner. Mrs. Okonkwo made introductions. That's not coercion. These are just unhappy marriages blaming a matchmaker, the crowd murmured, uncertain. Amara felt something ignite in her chest. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. She threatened my brother with prison violence. She told me girls like me exist to solve problems for our betters. She demanded I humiliate my husband publicly to prove I knew my place. Amara looked directly at the man. Does that sound like matchmaking to you? Silence dropped like a stone. The man opened his mouth. No sound came. She used my poverty as a weapon, Amara continued, her voice steady. She counted on me being too ashamed, too powerless, too afraid to speak. But shame only works when you're isolated. And I'm not isolated anymore. A guest near the back started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, applause filled the ballroom, not the performative kind from earlier, but genuine recognition. Nkem distributed business cards. If you or someone you know was coerced, contact my firm. We're building a case, and we're not stopping until the entire network is exposed. Phones rang as people stepped outside to make calls, warning friends, alerting family. The web Mrs. Okonkwo had woven unraveled in real time. By the time the first dance began, a slow Afrobeat remix of Sweet Mother, the wedding was trending across Nigerian social media. 3 hashtags competed: Billionaire CEO wedding, justice for Amara. Okonkwo exposed videos spread like wildfire. Someone had recorded the entire ceremony twist. Another guest live-streamed Mrs. Okonkwo's arrest. A third posted the evidence projection. News blogs picked it up within the hour. Billionaire CEO exposes society matriarch's coercion ring at own wedding. Pulse Nigeria, from prison to power. Chidi Okoli's remarkable story. The Guardian. Orphan seamstress stands up to Lagos elite. I'm not isolated anymore. Bella Niger Amara's phone exploded with notifications. Messages from clients, old classmates, strangers offering support. One message from Obiora, the mathematics teacher. I saw the videos. You were always brave. I just wasn't brave enough to see it. Congratulations on your freedom. Near midnight, as guests filtered out, Sister Ngozi approached with a wrapped package. This belonged to your mother, she told Amara. She left it with the church before she passed. Said to give it to you on your wedding day. Amara's fingers trembled, unwrapping the brown paper. Inside was a leather journal worn at the edges. She opened it. Her mother's handwriting filled the first page. The words blurred as tears came. What is it? Someone nearby asked. Amara looked up. 20 guests still remained, including Emeka, Chidi, Sister Ngozi, Barrister Nkem, people who'd witnessed the day's transformation. My mother's words, Amara said softly. Then louder, she knew. She knew what it felt like to be told you're less than whole. She read aloud, her voice strengthening with each line. Amara, my daughter of resilience, marriage is not rescue. It's partnership. Never let anyone tell you that you are less than complete on your own. The purple flowers I embroidered on my wedding dress were for remembering. Even in ceremonies we don't choose, we can choose what we create within them. Love fiercely. Forgive freely. But never ever apologize for taking up space in this world. The remaining guests stood frozen. Several wiped their eyes. Phones captured the moment, not invasively but reverently. Amara touched the purple flowers on her own dress. She embroidered them too. The same impulse across generations. Beauty claimed in constrained spaces. Chidi's eyes were wet. This is your inheritance. Not poverty. Not orphanhood. This, Sister Ngozi smiled through tears. Your mama would be so proud of the space you took up today. By morning, Mrs. Okonkwo's phone records, subpoenaed by Magistrate Adeyemi, revealed connections to 3 magistrates, 5 corporate lawyers, 2 state representatives who'd facilitated her schemes. A special investigative panel was formed. Chief Okonkwo released a statement distancing himself from his wife's actions and announcing immediate retirement. His company's stocks dropped 12%. Tunde Okonkwo turned state's witness in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony implicated 4 other society families in similar patterns. The gold fist brooch became a symbol on social media, a warning about violence hidden beneath respectable surfaces. Late that night, Amara and Chidi stood on the balcony overlooking Victoria Island. Lagos sprawled below, a million lights marking a million stories. 3 journalists want interviews, Amara said, holding her phone. They want me to talk about coercion, poverty, standing up to power. Do you want to? I don't know. Part of me wants to go back to my sewing machine and pretend today was a dream. She paused. But another part knows that's not possible anymore. What does that part want? To make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to the next orphan girl some society matriarch decides is disposable. Amara looked at him. But I'm terrified of becoming a symbol instead of a person. Then be both. Be a person who uses her voice strategically. Chidi leaned on the railing. What happens now is your choice, not mine. Not the journalists, yours. Below them, a street vendor sold suya, smoke rising from his grill. Life continuing, ordinary and extraordinary at once. 1 year, Amara said. That was the original agreement. We dissolve this quietly, I get my life back. Is that still what you want? She considered. Freedom looked different when you were choosing it rather than having it denied. Ask me again in 1 year. After we've built something real or discovered we can't. She turned to face him fully. But as equals. You promised me that. I did. And I keep my promises. Chidi offered his hand. Equal partners. Starting now, Amara shook it. The handshake was formal, almost comical after the day's drama. But it felt right. A foundation laid deliberately, with both people standing on solid ground. Tomorrow I'll call one journalist, she decided. Tell my story once on my terms. Then I go back to sewing. But sewing with purpose. What kind of purpose? Teaching other girls the trade. So they have options when powerful people try to make them small. Chidi smiled. That sounds like taking up space to me. The Lagos night hummed around them, holding space for whatever they would build next. The interview aired on Channels TV's morning program. Amara sat across from the anchor, wearing a simple purple blouse she'd sewn herself, the silver bracelet visible on her wrist. The anchor leaned forward. Some people are saying you trapped a billionaire. That you used your brother's arrest to manipulate a wealthy man into marriage. Amara's hands stilled. The studio lights felt suddenly hot. Then she remembered. Never apologize for taking up space. Mrs. Okonkwo counted on me being too ashamed to speak. She counted on people blaming the poor girl instead of the powerful woman who created the trap. Amara looked directly at the camera. If you're watching this and someone is using your poverty, your family, your fear against you, speak anyway. The shame belongs to them, not you. The clip went viral. Within days, 3 more women came forward. The investigative panel expanded. Lagos society began the slow, painful work of acknowledging its complicity. 3 weeks after the wedding, Barrister Nkem called. Mrs. Okonkwo's lawyer wants a meeting. She's offering written apology and restitution. Amara sat in her workshop, surrounded by fabric scraps. Emeka was enrolled at University of Lagos, studying engineering, mentored by Chidi's company. Her life had transformed, but her sewing machine remained constant, solid, reliable, hers. Does she have to be there? She insists on apologizing in person. Amara thought of her mother's journal. Forgive freely, but never apologize for taking up space. I'll meet her. But Chidi comes with me. Neutral space. Not her territory. Magistrate's chambers. Next Tuesday. Mrs. Okonkwo looked diminished in plain clothes. No gold jewelry. No fist brooch. No entourage. Just a woman in a simple wrapper, her hands folded on the table like a supplicant. Magistrate Adeyemi sat as witness. Barrister Nkem and Mrs. Okonkwo's lawyer flanked their clients. Chidi sat beside Amara, present but silent. Her choice to make alone. Mrs. Okonkwo's lawyer placed documents on the table. My client wishes to make a statement. Mrs. Okonkwo looked at Amara. Her eyes held something new, genuine recognition of harm done. I told myself I was helping people, arranging marriages, building networks. But I was building cages, her voice cracked. Last week my daughter called. She's been in therapy for 5 years because I arranged her first marriage. She was 19. He was 43. She finally had the courage to tell me she's never forgiven me for it. The room held its breath. She said she watched your wedding video and realized she wasn't crazy, that what happened to her had a name, coercion. Mrs. Okonkwo's hands shook. My own daughter. And I didn't see. She pushed a check across the table. 5 million. This doesn't erase what I did. But it's what I can offer. Amara didn't touch the check immediately. Why did you do it? Power. I grew up poor like you. Married into wealth. Spent 30 years terrified someone would take it away. So I made sure I controlled everything, everyone. She paused. I became exactly what I was afraid of. Amara let the silence sit. Then, I forgive you. Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes widened, wet with tears. I forgive you because holding hatred would poison me. Because my mother taught me forgiveness is freedom from bitterness. Amara leaned forward. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. We will never be in relationship. You will never contact me, my brother, or my husband again. Your apology is noted. Our chapter is closed. She picked up the check and handed it to Chidi. This goes to a scholarship fund for orphaned girls learning trades. They'll never know your name, only that someone wanted to make amends. Chidi nodded. The Resilience Fund, for girls who refuse to be made small. Mrs. Okonkwo's shoulders shook. Thank you for being more merciful than I was. I'm not being merciful to you, Amara said quietly. I'm being merciful to myself. You don't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. Chidi used his influence to lobby the Lagos State Assembly. Within 6 months, new legislation passed, the Anti-Coercion in Marriage Act, criminalizing the use of debt, false accusations, or family pressure to force matrimonial arrangements. Maximum penalty, 10 years. The Bail Reform Initiative, capping guarantor requirements, requiring video documentation to prevent manipulation, Amara testified before the committee. Her words were quoted in newspapers, used in law schools, referenced by activists, but her favorite reform was smaller, quieter. She opened Amara's atelier in Surulere. 5 sewing machines, 10 students per cycle, all young women from low-income backgrounds. Free training, materials provided, job placement after graduation. On the wall, her mother's framed quote, "Never apologize for taking up space in this world." One afternoon, a 19-year-old student asked, "Miss Amara, what if we're not strong enough to stand up like you did?" Amara looked up from the hem she was stitching. "You don't need to be strong. You just need to refuse to disappear, one stitch at a time, one boundary at a time. The strength comes from continuing." The girl nodded and returned to her machine. The rhythm of sewing filled the room, 10 women claiming space, one stitch at a time. The anniversary fell on a Sunday. Amara woke in the modest home she and Chidi had chosen together. Not a mansion, but a house with a garden where purple bougainvillea climbed the walls. Chidi was already awake, sitting on the balcony with coffee and the morning papers. The headlines had moved on to other scandals, other stories. But the Anti-Coercion Act had changed 800 lives in its first year. The Resilience Fund had trained 63 girls. "So," Chidi said as she joined him, "1 year. You said to ask you again," Amara smiled. "Ask me what?" "If you still want to dissolve this arrangement quietly and get your life back." She looked out at Lagos waking up, hawkers setting up stalls, buses filling with commuters, a city that held space for both struggle and transformation. "I got my life back the day I chose to stay," she said. "Not because you rescued me, because I rescued myself, and you were wise enough to let me." Chidi's hand found hers. "So we continue? We build, together, as equals." Emeka was thriving at university, top of his engineering class. He volunteered at Amara's atelier on weekends, teaching the students basic math for pattern making. Sister Ngozi hosted Sunday dinners, where students, lawyers, and former society matrons who'd left toxic marriages gathered around jollof rice and truth-telling. Mrs. Okonkwo completed community service teaching life skills to at-risk youth. Her daughter began speaking publicly about coerced marriage. Healing was slow, imperfect, but happening. Chief Okonkwo's company restructured under new management, implementing ethics training. Tunde Okonkwo worked in a textile factory, learning what honest labor felt like. The silver watch sat in a glass case in their living room with a plaque. "Heritage is what you build, not what you're owed." Amara stood at her sewing machine one evening, finishing a wedding dress for a client. Purple flowers embroidered along the hem, her signature now requested by brides who knew the story. Chidi leaned against the doorframe, watching. "What are you thinking?" "That some people call it fate. I call it grace." She tied off the thread. "The man they said was dangerous saved me. The life they said was ruined became my foundation. The cage they built became the door I walked through. And on the other side, everything I was always meant to build. What would you do if forced to choose between family and freedom? Have you witnessed injustices where the powerless were trapped by the powerful? Share your real-life stories in the comments. Your voice matters. These African stories and touching stories from across the continent remind us that resilience rewrites fate. This is more than African folklore. These are life stories that prove dignity cannot be purchased, only claimed. If Amara's journey moved you, subscribe for more stories of everyday courage. Hit the notification bell. Next week, the market woman who outsmarted a governor. Because every voice that refuses to disappear makes space for the next one to rise.